On this Tuesday night, building relationships and big projects. The Prime Minister and coastal First Nations leaders talk resource development.
This can't be a one-off meeting.
The pipeline push and push back.
It would take just one spill to destroy our way of life.
The U.S. President's message to the Iranian people.
I think President Trump is responding to the call that the Iranian people have.
And their struggle to communicate with the outside world. Sending out an SOS, why doctors say Alberta's ERs are in crisis. Plus, setting a date.
I'm really excited because there's a Canadian astronaut.
When Artemis 2 could finally launch to the moon.
Global National with Donna Friesen.
Good evening and thanks for joining us. Canada's Prime Minister got a clear message today from coastal First Nations leaders. Mark Carney was invited by them to visit northern BC, his first meeting since signing a memorandum of understanding with Alberta to explore building an oil pipeline to British Columbia's coast. Carney called it a chance for dialogue, and First Nations leaders say while they want to work in partnership on strengthening ocean protection, they remain opposed to any project that will bring more oil tankers to coastal waters. Aaron McArthur has our top story tonight. Aaron.
Donna, the Prime Minister is here in Prince Rupert at the invitation of Healthsec Chief Marilyn Slett. It is the first face-to-face conversation in what will be a long, contentious path forward.
Good morning.
On the agenda, moving the needle on economic development. Major projects already fast-tracked, such as LNG Canada and the Silesims LNG terminals, plus transmission lines and critical mineral mining operations. The focus will not be on the pipeline proposed from Alberta to BC, but that issue will be front and center for Indigenous leadership. First Nations have been clear. There is no support for a pipeline or a lifting of the tanker moratorium on the North Coast.
It was, really important that he accepted our invitation to come here in person, see us face to face, and recognize that we're not just talking about strategic trade corridors and global trade, but this is our home.
There is no technology that can clean up an oil spill at sea, and that it would take just one spill to destroy our way of life.
The Prime Minister continues to say First Nations support is critical for any projects moving forward.
It's a decisive moment for Canada, and I'm very focused on not just building, but how we build and how we build together. So today is really about a dialogue.
The government also making major commitments to strengthen ocean protection and emergency response. First Nations leaders call it a positive meeting.
This can't be a one-off meeting. We have to, be able to work together and continue to have that dialogue. And I think that there is a commitment here to, ensure that that dialogue happens.
Alberta Premier Danielle Smith has indicated that a proposal for the pipeline will be forwarded to the Major Projects Office by no later than July 1st. But at this point, no private money has stepped forward willing to build this project. Donna?
Aaron McArthur in Prince Rupert, BC. Thanks, Aaron. The Prime Minister's next stop is China. Mark Carney, invited by the Chinese president, is looking for opportunities to expand trade and diversify away from reliance on the U.S. But Canada's relationship with China is complex, both because of economic coercion and security. Ontario's premier today warned against easing Canada's 100% tariff on Chinese electric vehicles, though Canadian farmers are just as eager for China to drop a hefty tariff imposed on Canadian canola and peas. David Aiken explains what's at stake and what's expected. David.
Well, Donna, Prime Minister Mark Carney's advisors have told us that the 2 days that Carney will spend in China are not the only chance to get rid of punishing tariffs that the Chinese have imposed on Canadian canola. Instead, the meetings Carney will have in Beijing are all about what officials say both sides addressing, quote, systemic trade irritants. Still, Canada's canola producers remain hopeful.
What we're hoping for is to see some movement, I guess, from that engagement into action and towards resolution on some of these issues.
Canadian canola producers sold $5 billion worth of product to China in 2024, but that disappeared when China slapped 100% tariffs on Canadian canola in response to Canada's decision to slap tariffs on Chinese electric vehicles. Now, dropping tariffs on Chinese EVs would decimate Canada's auto industry.
When you have the Chinese government wanting to dump cheap Chinese parts and cheap vehicles here, it cost the Canadian and American jobs. So I'm absolutely 100% dead against this.
Dropping EV tariffs would also infuriate the United States. And yet, canola farmers are counting on Carney to find some way to get China to drop canola tariffs.
If there isn't a positive outcome to that, it's going to really, I think we'll feel it.
This is a political issue that requires a political solution.
As if to underline the urgency of the issue, Scott Moe, the Premier of Saskatchewan, where they grow a lot of canola, will join Carney in Beijing. All that said, Carney's advisors say, and I want to quote this, they say, it would be reasonable to expect progress, but not a definitive removal of tariffs. Donna.
Okay, David Aiken traveling with the Prime Minister. Thanks, David. The U.S. president is urging Iranians to keep protesting and claimed today that help is on the way. It's not clear what that means. At the same time, Global Affairs Canada is urging Canadian citizens in Iran to leave now. Exactly what is happening on the streets of Iran is hard to gauge. Foreign journalists are not allowed in, and the regime has cut communications. Human rights groups estimate more than 2,000 people, possibly more, have been killed in protests. And as Jackson Proskow reports, the Trump administration appears to be weighing its options.
Inside the White House, a tense calculation is underway over potential U.S. involvement in Iran and whether President Donald Trump can help topple the regime.
I say make Iran great again. You know, it was a great country until these monsters came in and took it over. And it's all very fragile.
On social media, Trump suggested he has given up on diplomacy. Iranian patriots keep protesting. Take over your institutions, he wrote, adding he has canceled all meetings with Iranian officials until the senseless killing of protesters stops. Help is on its way.
What did you mean by that? What kind of help?
You're going to have to figure that one out. I'm sorry.
It has to be, at the end of the day, up to the Iranian people to choose their own leaders. The U.S. and its allies can create the conditions that make that possible.
Pressure on the U.S. to do something is growing.
I think President Trump is responding to the call that the Iranian people have.
The exiled Crown Prince of Iran issued a direct plea for Trump to get involved, warning more civilians could die.
That the best way to ensure that there will be less people killed in Iran is to intervene sooner so this regime finally collapses and puts an end to all the problems that we are facing.
After decades of hostility with Tehran, in Washington there appears to be a temptation to seize the moment.
The president made it very clear if you're killing the innocent for simply protesting, that he'll come to the rescue, and the president doesn't bluff.
Even if Washington gets involved, there are no guarantees the protesters fighting for freedom will actually get it.
You know, it's nasty. And what if it continues independent of anything that the U.S. does? Controlling outcomes in a country committed to killing peaceful protesters is really challenging with half measures.
In recent days, senior White House officials have reportedly met with members of Iran's opposition. Secretary of State Marco Rubio insists the U.S. is looking at non-kinetic operations in Iran, contemplating cyber attacks or espionage over bombs. Donna?
All right, Jackson Proskow in Washington. The internet remains cut off in Iran, but for the first time since last week, some international phone calls have been getting through and information is trickling out. Today, even Iranian state TV acknowledged the high death toll in nationwide protests. Redmond Shannon reports.
Iranian state TV says this is the aftermath of one of the anti-government protests. A market burned down in what it called a terrorist incident. The country's foreign minister Abbas Araghchi says Iran has evidence that the US and Israel have aided what he also calls terrorism. Iran's government continues to use that term when referring to protesters, as it brutally suppresses demonstrations across Iran. An Iranian human rights group says this protester, Irfan Sultan, will be executed on Wednesday.
The internet blackout essentially gave the regime complete freedom to do whatever they want to end these protests.
As some international phone calls out of Iran resumed, Reuters news agency and an advocacy group both reported that about 2,000 people have been killed in the 2 weeks of protests. Other estimates are even higher. Some video has been getting out despite the internet blackout, including this footage from a city in northwestern Iran. It first appeared online Monday. Elon Musk's Starlink satellite system is credited with helping people post videos online.
Some of the equipment is in the hands of activists and in the hands of journalists.
Iranian media published a video Tuesday which it claims shows a seizure of an illegal shipment of Starlinks. Even with a relative trickle of information, anti-government campaigners say the world is again being reminded of how the Islamic Republic operates.
Almost every family in Iran has experienced this nightmare under this regime for the past 47 years.
Unless Iran's government changes or changes course, Iranians are taking their lives in their hands by taking to the streets. Redmond Shannon, Global News, London.
In Gaza, at least 6 people have died after a powerful winter storm tore through refugee camps. The rainstorm caused the collapse of multiple damaged buildings and flooded hundreds of tents, while strong wind gusts sent others flying. 3 months since the ceasefire halted major combat, Israeli forces have ordered the near total depopulation of about 2/3 of Gaza. That's forced more than 2 million people into a narrow strip near the coast where most live in makeshift tents or damaged buildings. A warning to check your freezers tonight. Coming up, the burgers that have been recalled and why. A school bus carrying high school students went off the road and rolled over in western Manitoba this morning. The bus from the Sapota-Wayak Cree Nation went off the road about 550 kilometers northwest of Winnipeg. 14 students were on board along with the driver. All were taken to a local hospital, most with minor injuries, and 4 with significant but not life-threatening injuries were airlifted to Winnipeg. Investigators say the bus was trying to pass another vehicle in the freezing rain when it happened. Alberta's new chief medical health officer says the flu season in that province appears to have peaked. A surge in patients had pushed wait times past what is considered safe, and doctors' groups have been calling on the province to declare a state of emergency. Heather Yourex-West reports on how Alberta's healthcare system is coping.
In her first media address of 2026, Alberta's chief medical officer of health offered some hopeful news.
Early indicators suggest that influenza A activity has reached its peak.
An early season flu surge hit Alberta's emergency departments hard in December. It meant a system already under strain was forced to deal with even more demand. On December 19th, 44-year-old Prashant Kumar died of an apparent cardiac arrest after waiting 8 hours in an Edmonton emergency department. The situation prompting some doctors to call on the province to enact a system-wide emergency response.
The volume of patients still coming through the doors needing care remains exceedingly high, and we simply don't have the capacity to treat them.
According to the Alberta Medical Association, the wait times for urgent patients in Alberta's major cities have increased by 70% since 2022. Across the province, hospitals have been operating at 110% capacity for more than a year.
The province is undergoing significant restructuring to the health system. So we've shifted from one centralized health authority to 4 new health agencies.
The Alberta government also changed the way influenza and COVID vaccines were distributed this year. Flu vaccine coverage for the province currently sits at 19%, a 15-year low. But the Canadian Medical Association says these problems are not Alberta's alone, and emergency departments are under pressure from coast to coast to coast.
Vaccine uptake is lower in most provinces right across the country than what previously has been demonstrated decades ago. So this does pose a problem.
After being criticized for its silence on the crisis for several weeks, the Alberta government has plans to take questions at a media conference scheduled for Thursday. Heather Yourex-West, Global News, Calgary.
A Canada-wide recall has been issued for no-name beef burgers because of possible E. coli contamination. The frozen burgers are sold in boxes of 12 with a best before date of May 5th, 2026. The Canadian Food Inspection Agency says the recall was triggered by its own testing. There have been no reported illnesses. If you have a box affected by the recall, you should throw it out or return it. Ahead, what the Minister of Greenland is saying before a high-stakes meeting at the White House. A high-stakes meeting is set for tomorrow in Washington between the foreign ministers of Greenland and Denmark and Trump administration officials, including the vice president. President Trump has repeatedly said he wants to take over Greenland, either by buying it or through military force. Most Greenlanders are opposed to that, and today Greenland's prime minister said, "We choose Denmark." Candace Cole reports.
There are quite a bit of worry.
Greenland's Mineral Resources Minister Tuesday addressing concerns over U.S. President Donald Trump's continued threats to take over the Arctic nation ahead of a key meeting among Greenland and Denmark's foreign ministers with Vice President J.D. Vance and Secretary of State Marco Rubio Wednesday at the White House. Greenland's Prime Minister Jens Frederik Nielsen reiterating that Greenland is not for sale during a joint press conference with the Danish Prime Minister, calling the situation a geopolitical crisis and, if pushed, would choose to stay as part of Denmark over becoming the 51st state. Trump says his push to acquire Greenland, which is rich in rare earth minerals, is a matter of strategic importance.
Right now, Greenland is covered with Russian and Chinese ships all over the place. We need Greenland from the standpoint of national security.
But European NATO leaders are in lockstep in their commitment to secure the region.
We all agree that when it comes to the protection of the Arctic, we have to work together.
Democratic lawmakers say the move would be disastrous.
Instead of being the world's chief diplomat and a leader in the world, you'll see the United States isolated as a pariah.
Trump has suggested the U.S. could buy Greenland outright from Denmark or take it by some other diplomatic means. Another idea that's been floated is handing out lump sum payments to Greenlanders to the tune of $10,000 to $100,000 per person. Trump, however, has not ruled out using military force.
I don't think anybody is considering that.
A group of bipartisan American lawmakers is now introducing legislation to prevent military action against NATO members, including Greenland. Action to take the Arctic island could happen in weeks, according to a senior White House official. Candace Cole, Global News, Washington.
Central banks across the world, including Canada, say they stand in full solidarity with the head of America's central bank, Jerome Powell. The heads of the Bank of England, Bank of Canada, the European Central Bank, and the banks of Australia and Korea, along with others, say the independence of central banks is a cornerstone of price, financial, and economic stability. Chairman Powell has served with integrity, focused on his mandate, and an unwavering commitment to the public interest. The U.S. Department of Justice is conducting a criminal investigation into Powell linked to renovations to the Federal Reserve headquarters. It follows a year of attacks on Powell by President Trump, who has called him a loser and a numbskull and pushed him to aggressively lower interest rates. Powell has largely stayed silent, but did issue a video statement last week warning the independence of the U.S. central bank is at stake. Launch dates laid out. Next, the challenges Canadian astronaut Jeremy Hansen and the Artemis II crew still face on their journey to the moon.
Sergey, it's an honor and a pleasure to be a commander, and I cannot imagine being happier than to hand over command to you.
A NASA astronaut hands over command of the International Space Station to a Russian cosmonaut ahead of his team's early return to Earth. One of the NASA astronauts has an unspecified medical condition, and the four-member team has been ordered to leave orbit ahead of schedule. A crew of 3, an American and 2 Russians, will remain aboard the space station. And as early as next month, NASA's first manned mission around the moon and back in more than 50 years could be lifting off. The space agency today released potential launch windows for Artemis II. Heidi Petrachuk on the countdown and the Canadian crew member.
In
In less than a month, the Artemis 2 mission could rocket to the moon, with potential launch dates from NASA starting as early as February 6th. Canadians are following along closely, knowing Jeremy Hansen will be aboard the Orion spacecraft.
I'm really excited because there's a Canadian astronaut that is going to be traveling around the moon and see the far side of it. Yeah.
NASA has set aside 3 potential launch periods in February, March, and April.
It's every lunar month, so every 4 weeks, 28 days.
Chosen for very specific reasons.
The moon lines up with the Earth in a way that it's kind of convenient to get there as easily as possible. Also, you need to be sure the spacecraft doesn't stay too long in the shadow of the Earth so that the solar panel keep working.
But variables could keep the mission on the ground.
Weather is a big concern. The other thing are just technical issues. This is a very complicated machine, and it's a very delicate mission. So they're going to make sure that they can get this mission launched and off the ground as safely as possible.
Boosters ignited. Once it does get up and away,
Jeremy Hansen will be the first person ever, non-American, to leave Earth's orbit.
Hansen and the 3 other astronauts would then spend roughly 10 days traveling to and around the moon, looping in a figure-8 trajectory. A mission NASA hopes will lead to the establishment of a more permanent human presence on the lunar surface. Canada already planning its contribution.
We're already building a 3rd-generation robotic arm for a mini space station around the moon, the Gateway, and we're also going to provide rovers.
This weekend, crews are expected to move the mission's mega moon rocket to its launch pad at Florida's Kennedy Space Center, taking 12 hours to cover just 6 kilometers. A slow but sure step towards liftoff. Heidi Petracek, Global News, Halifax.
And that is Global National for this Tuesday. I'm Donna Friesen. Tonight's Your Canada is Banff, Alberta. We'd love to see your Canada. Please email it to globalnational@globalnews.ca. And thanks for watching. Hope to see you here again tomorrow. Bye-bye.